Able to make it today, so I'm going to be giving a little class. The topic I want to speak about today is something that, many people think about every time Purim comes along. Now, the reason why it's such an important topic is because Purim is one of those, very, very interesting holidays that, everyone feels like that Purim is just the time to let it loose. We put on costumes, let's get drunk, let's have a few drinks, let's have a good time, let's go party. It's almost like at some Purim parties feels like a rave. And the question is this what was truly intended when they instituted the holiday of Purim? It obviously was a great miracle. It was, the Jewish people were saved, and one of the greatest miracles that the Jews have been through. But the question is that was this is what they intended? That, we should just get drunk, lose our minds, and have a good time. Can you hear me clearly? Thumbs up. Perfect. So the first place that we find our rabbis speak about drinking on Purim is found in actually the Mishnah Megillah. We find that Rava, the great sage Rava, lived in the fourth generations of the Talmud. He says that it's an obligation for someone to drink on Purim until he doesn't know the difference between Haman being evil and Mordechai being blessed. So at first glance, you read the statement, you're like, so what's the objective of Purim? What are we trying to accomplish? You got to get so drunk that you can't tell between good and evil. And this, we can ask a very, very simple question. Isn't the whole purpose of the holiday that there was good, there was evil, and good prevailed? The Jews won, right? Wasn't the whole purpose of the holiday that we were saved? Imagine you showed up to the Passover Seder, and you're like, I think tonight I need to eat so much matzah and that matzah bowl soup and eat the murr and get it so hot and spicy with the matzah and the murr and the meat and the wine that by the end of the night, I can't tell the difference between Moses and Pharaoh. I'm not sure if Moses was the good one. I'm not sure if Pharaoh was the good one. Or like imagine on Hanukkah, you're like, I need to eat so many donuts this year and latkes and donuts that you can't tell the difference between Antiochus and Matisyo and the Maccabees. Everyone just looks the same at this point. Obviously that would be absurd. The whole purpose of the holiday of Hanukkah, the whole purpose of the holiday of Passover is that we celebrate the freedom, we celebrate the victory. There was good, there was evil, and we're celebrating that we've overcome evil, right? You show up to the Passover Seder, it's all about how Pharaoh was one of the most wicked people to ever live, and what he wanted to do to the Jewish people was very close to what Haman wanted to do. And how do we celebrate it? We remember God taking us out and God freeing us. And let's take Hanukkah. Hanukkah is another great example of a holiday that the Jews were saved. How do we celebrate Hanukkah? We light the menorah. We sing around the menorah, community celebration. We speak about the miracle. We recite the Hallel, the very unique prayer that we only recite on special holidays. We recite that prayer on Hanukkah, and we give thanks to God. And there's a clear distinction. Not only that, in the prayer that we say on Hanukkah is that you get to put the hands of the wicked to the hands of the righteous, the many in the hands of few, showing the differences between the Jews and the Maccabees and the Greeks. And somehow, what Jewish law tells us to do, and it starts in the Mishnah, in the Talmud, what do we have to do on Purim? Drink until you don't know the difference between Mordechai and Haman. Now, we all know of good people in our lives. We all know of bad people in our lives. But we have to drink so much. But who even thought of this idea? Where did this idea come up that we have to, that you can't know if something's good or evil on Purim night? Everything has to be the same. You just got to get totally plastered. So when we actually look at Jewish law, we find Jewish law was written there were a few people who wrote Jewish law. It was written by the Beis Yosef. We find that he writes two things. The first, he says that he repeats the Talmud, and he says everyone has to drink on Purim until they don't know the difference between the wicked of Haman, how wicked Haman was, and how blessed Mordechai was. And then here's what he continues saying. He said, when I meant that you have to drink so much, not that you should get drunk, because drunkenness can obviously lead to terrible things. I don't want, if those who are history buffs and knows what the stories of the Torah, two of the worst stories that children have ever committed with their parents in the Torah happened due to drunkenness, right? Noah's son, right? We know the story of Noah's son. Noah got drunk, and therefore his son felt like he didn't want his father to have any more kids. And we have the story of Lot being with his, getting drunk, and his two daughters being with him. And both of those stories happen because of drunkenness. So clearly, drinking is not a great thing. Getting drunk, Jewish law tells the Ramah tells us that it's not a good thing to get drunk. So, what did the rabbis say in the 3rd century of the Talmud? Say that we should get drunk and you shouldn't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai. Drink a little more than what you're used to. You usually have 1 glass of wine, have 2 glasses of wine. You usually have 1 shot, have 2 shots. Add to the celebration. You need a little more l'chaim. But not that you should get totally drunk. That's a red line you shouldn't cross. So much so, another great rabbi who wrote a great work on Jewish law, his name was the Ramah, writes that you don't even need a drink. If the rabbi in the Talmud said that the purpose of the celebration of Purim is that you shouldn't know the difference between Haman and Mordechai, just go to sleep. Take a little nap. And when you take a little nap, right, when you're sleeping, tell me, when you're sleeping, do you know the difference between Haman and Mordechai? No? Very good. Just take a little nap, and then you'll fulfill your obligation not knowing the difference in Haman and Mordechai. But obviously, there's a lot more. When you look at the story of Purim, I think it's, besides it being such a fascinating story when you get into the details, there's a lot of partying going on, right? When we read the Megillah, there's a lot of parties, a lot of people having a good time. It starts off with a 180-day feast, followed by a 7-day feast just for the residents of Shushan. What happens by that 7-day feast? The story starts. Achashverosh kills his wife Vashti. Vashti doesn't want to come to the party, and therefore he kills his wife. Now, chances are Vashti was drunk when that happened, right? Because she was having her own party. And Achashverosh was definitely drunk because he just finished 180 days of partying, followed by 7 days of partying. So it was a long party, almost over a half a year of partying. What happens next? Esther's elected queen, and she throws a party when she's elected queen. And then the decree comes out. Haman and Achashverosh plot to kill all the Jews. And how does Esther save the Jewish people? By having another party. Invite Haman, invite the king, one party after another party, and then we're good to go. She spoils Haman's plan, and Haman is killed, and the Jews are saved. And what do the Jews do when they're saved? They sit down and have a party. There's a lot of drinking over here, so maybe the reason why we're so into drinking on Purim is the whole story goes from one party to the next, from one celebration. Either it's a good celebration or a bad celebration, but there's a lot of drinking. But here I want to take it a step further. So I want to go into the name of the holiday. The name of the holiday is obviously it's Purim, right? Have you ever thought what the name Purim means? So the Megillah actually gives us a clue. The Megillah tells us that the name Purim comes from the word pur. Pur means lot, like a raffle, right? And why would you name Purim from the word pur, which means a lot? Because Haman didn't know when to kill the Jews, so he decided he's going to do a raffle every day of the year, every single month. And the 13th day of the month of Adar was pulled out as the day that he wants to kill all the Jews. And that's the day that eventually was turned over and the Jews were victorious over their enemies, and the Jews celebrated the next day. So to remember the lot that Haman did, right? Haman put together this raffle. What day he wants to kill the Jews? We decided to name the name for it. Now, let me ask you something, okay? Imagine Pharaoh had a name for his plan to annihilate the Jews, killing all the baby boys. The girls won't have any Jewish boys to marry. They'll all marry Egyptians. Eventually, no Jews left, right? And he names, give it any random name. He names it. I don't know. Any ideas? Any clues for a good name that Pharaoh would? He names it some name, and then the Jews are saved. And to commemorate the holiday of being saved from Pharaoh, we use the same name that Pharaoh used to want to kill all the Jews, right? That's exactly what's happening here. Purim comes from the word pur, which means the raffle that Haman put together in order to kill all the Jews. And now to celebrate the holiday of Purim, what do? Let's name it. We're at a name, so we have to name it what cause the entire holiday, right? But it's not what caused the salvation, it's what caused the decree in the first place. Why do we give Haman the chance to name the holiday? Right? Who came up with the word Pur? Haman did. And why do we name it holiday Purim? Because Haman did a Pur. Haman did a raffle, so therefore we'll name it Purim. Why do we let Haman name the holiday of Purim? Now, I want to take it one step further. The Zohar says that one of the reasons why they kept the name Purim for the holiday of Purim is because it's very similar to the name Kippurim, like Purim. And Yom Kippurim is a very holiday. Purim is a very holiday. So it's like, it's similar. We'll name it Purim, like Yom Kippurim. Now, if I had to ask you, okay, serious question, everyone. What are the two Jewish holidays that are the most further apart from each other in the way we act, in the way we dress, in the way we celebrate? The two Jewish holidays that are the most distinct from each other is Yom Kippurim on one side and Purim on the other side, right? Yom Kippurim, we fast, we're in synagogue, we pray, we don't eat anything, we don't drink, definitely not partying. And Purim is the total opposite. There's, very few added prayers. Yeah, obviously we read from the Megillah, but very little added prayers. Most of the day we're drinking, we're gifting, we're carrying, we're doing regular stuff and just having a great time. How is Yom Kippurim compared to Purim? How do you compare the two holidays? Where do they come together? What is one thing that Yom Kippurim and Purim have in common? Right? How does the Zohar say, oh, Purim, Yom Kippurim, it sounds similar? Yeah, they must be similar. That's why they named it Purim. What? They are so different in every way possible. So, back to the question while we get drunk on Purim. The founder of the Chabad Hasidus says like this. The Alter Rebbe says it's not that you shouldn't know the total difference. In other words, it's not that you should say Haman is blessed and Mordechai is cursed. No, rather you should say it. Rather you should say without any knowledge that Haman is cursed and Mordechai is blessed. What does it mean that you shouldn't? In other words, you should say that Mordechai is blessed and Haman's cursed, not because you have the realization when you look at the story and say, this guy is good, this guy is evil. Not because that you realize. Rather, you should say it because this is how you feel, but not truly because of what you understand. But there's obviously a deeper message that the Alter Rebbe, the first Chabad Rebbe, is trying to tell us that you should say that Haman's curse and Mordechai is blessed, but not from your knowledge. What does it mean you should say it not from your knowledge, not from your understanding? Now, when we look at the Megillah, when the decree starts, what happens? How does Haman come up with this idea? Haman has a big ego. He wants to be the most powerful man alive, but there's another man in this that his name is Achashverosh. He's the king. But he convinces the king to give him the ring. He becomes second in command. And he is so eager for everyone to respect him that he commands the entire kingdom that when he walks by, you got to bow down. No one greater than him. And what happens? The Megillah tells us that Haman sees Mordechai doesn't bow down to him. And Haman got furious. And he wanted to kill just Mordechai. But then they told him the nation of Mordechai, and therefore Haman asked to kill all the Jews in the entire kingdom of Achashverosh, the nation of Mordechai. Now let me ask you a question. You know, many Jews at the time were living in Shushan, were assimilated, right? The Medrash tells us that many Jews went to Achashverosh's party. Many Jews didn't care much about their Judaism. Haman sees Mordechai not bowing down, and he can't stand that Mordechai exists. So why doesn't he kill Mordechai? Well, that's his original plan. But then he's told that there's a nation of people that Mordechai comes from. In other words, Mordechai's greatness is not because he is this pious, religious man that doesn't believe in the fact that you should bow down to a human being, and he's living in some spiritual higher realm than everyone else around. No, because if that was the case, he would just kill Mordechai and done with, or kill Mordechai, his disciples, his family, his relatives, and that's it. We're done. Haman realizes that Mordechai's greatness and his stubbornness, and the fact that he doesn't want to bow down to him, is because he's part of a nation. And therefore he decides, I have to get rid of every single person who identifies as part of this nation, regardless of where they are. And listen to what Haman goes to Achashverosh, and he says like this, there is a nation. Yeshno Am Echad. There is this one nation. Now, when you think of Jews, what's the first thing, right? Especially after October 7th, wow, we're really united, right? Most Jews are really united. That's your first thought. Then if you watch the Oscars on Sunday night and you hear a Jew get up on stage and refute his Judaism, you understand what Haman continues saying to Achashverosh. So he first tells Achashverosh, there's this one nation. You know, these Jews, they segregate themselves. They have their own synagogues, house of worship. They live in these small, tight communities. They don't marry outside of outside of themselves. They're very different. You know, people look at some religious Jewish communities are like, these people are in a little bubble. So that's the first thing they say. The Yeshno Am Echad. You know, the reason why there's anti-Semitism in this world is because they are so different. The Jews, they don't mix with anyone else. They only take care of themselves. And what's the next thing? Literally the next word that Haman is trying to convince Achashverosh to kill the Jews. What does he say? Mifuzar, mifurud beinam, and they are scattered and they're assimilated in between the nations. In other words, you know why you should kill all the Jews? Because they're taking over the industries, they are taking over the media, they are taking over the businesses, they are spread out and assimilated in every aspect of everyone's lives, and there's only one way to get rid of them is by killing them. So in a sense, Haman understood anti-Semitism, all right? Haman understood, I'm saying just look at Haman's words, and now we understand where, you know, some people, they said that Jews need to assimilate. We need to change our last name. You come to America, you know, you get a nose job. You shouldn't look so Jewish. Don't wear a kippah in public. Don't wear your tzitzis. And maybe if you assimilate yourself, like what Haman said, if mefuzar mefurd, but if you get spread out between the nations and you're assimilated, then you won't be killed. And what does Haman say to Achashverosh? You know why we need to kill the Jews? Because they're assimilated and they took everything over and they run the world. And then you're going to tell yourself, so maybe as Jews, we should go back to the shtetl, live in a little bubble like you find in Brooklyn. There's a few pockets of Jewish communities that only Jews live there, and it's very, you know, it's very hard to mix in unless you're part of that community. We have to segregate ourselves from everyone else. And you know what Haman says to that? Yeshno Am Echad, there's this one nation. There's these people, they don't mix with anyone else. They're very different, very distinct. We should kill them because these people they don't look at anyone else. They don't talk to anyone else. Regardless of what type of Jew you are, Haman wanted to kill you. Right? And there's this story. I think his last name was Bach, Mayor Bach. There was a group of mayors that went on a tour to Europe from America, and they went to Eagle's Nest. It was a Holocaust tour, and one of the places they took them to was to Hitler's house. And when they came to Eagle's Nest. They went through. They showed him, he had views, and where him and I forgot Hitler's wife's name, Van something. But where they lived and where they met and where he partied and what he did and where he strategized, to take over Europe. And then they went to his office, and this mayor sees on his office there's a globe. And he sees there's numbers on all the countries on the globe. So he asks the tour guide, what are these numbers on Hitler's globe? So he said, Hitler wrote down how many Jews there are in every country in the world. And he wanted to make sure that, we're free from Juden. We're free from Jews. And then he looks closely at the globe, and there's a country named Albania, very small country, Eastern Europe. And he sees that there was a 1 on Albania. And Hitler marked down that there's this 1 Jew in Albania that he wants to go kill. He wants to take over Albania just to kill that 1 Jew that lives there. That is how Haman thought. That is what Haman wanted to do. Haman, and when you look at Hitler, they didn't care if you were Mordechai. They didn't care if you were the most assimilated, apologetic Jew like Jonathan Glazer, who got up at the Oscars and refuted his Judaism. Haman and Hitler would have killed him, would have killed Glazer just as fast as he would have killed the most pious, holy rabbi from Brooklyn. There's no difference the way the enemies of the Jewish people look at Jews, regardless if you're part of the group of Jews who are Am Echad, like this one type nation, who lives alone, who segregates themselves, who have very strong beliefs, or Mifuzar, Mifurad, Ben Amin, or if you're spread out and you're assimilated throughout the nations. Haman wanted to kill you. Now let's try to understand a little bit what's so unique about the Jewish people that Haman saw that he said, there's only one solution to the Jewish problem. At first, Haman tries to appease Achashverosh and to pay Achashverosh for killing all the Jews, right? You can imagine there was a lot of Jews in government, there was a lot of Jews in important positions in Persia that would have been killed if Haman's plan would have went through. So what he tells the people of Persia, and we see this happen by the Holocaust, and this is so amazing. He says, we are going to wipe out and we're going to kill and we're going to destruct all the Jews from young to old, children and women in one day, the 13th day of Adar, 13th day of the 12th month, that's Adar, and their properties, ushlalam lavos, and their properties and their possessions for you to take. What happened in the Holocaust? How many non-Jews, and not all of them, got to give some non-Jews credit, but many, many non-Jews listened to the Nazis and worked together with the Nazis to find every single last Jew. Why? Because they were promised, the big nice house, the painting, the wealth, all going to be yours. If you help us kill the Jews, we're going to give you all the wealth that they own. And here's what the Mishnah tells us about this. The Mishnah tells us about the story of Haman and Achashverosh. Imagine there are 2 people, neighbors. One has a very big ditch in his field, and his fellow has a big pile of dirt. And the guy with the big pile of dirt is going around town. Who wants this dirt? I don't know what to do with this big pile of dirt. And then the guy with the ditch says, I'll buy the dirt off you. I have this big ditch to fill, right? So one guy wanted to pay someone to fill his ditch. The other person wanted to pay someone to take away his dirt. They said, you know what? How about this? You take the dirt for free and we'll all be good. This is Haman and Achashverosh. They one had a huge ego issue and one had a money issue. And this is what we see happen. Haman guarantees wealth to all the non-Jews of Persia, and Haman gets to fill his ego. He has a ditch. He sees this man named Mordechai. He says, I can't live one day while there's a Jew alive that doesn't believe in bowing down to me. He has a ditch in his heart. He can't stand the fact that there's someone that believes that there's a spiritual higher power higher than himself. And we get to fill it both in one day. But let's try to understand a little bit what's so unique about the Jewish people that Haman felt so important, and Hitler, and it's always the enemies of the Jewish people. It's always the enemies of the Jewish people that understand so well what a Jew is, right? We can't put it together. But the enemies, they always figure it out. They don't care if you're the most assimilated Jew in Germany or the most religious Jew from Poland. They were both treated the same, which is an important thing to remember, with everything happening in the world today. It's so important, when people blame religious Jews for anti-Semitism, or religious Jews blame secular Jews for anti-Semitism. Look at the Megillah. Everyone was treated the same. Look at Hitler. He treated every single Jew the same. He didn't care. But here's what the Alter Rebbe says. The Alter Rebbe says, and you chose us from every nation and from every language. What does it mean that God chose the Jewish people? It's the physical body. But even though the physical body of the Jews are similar to the nations of the world, but there's something different about a Jew. There's something different. Now, before I explain what's so unique about Jews, I want to tell you a little interesting conversation that the Medrash tells us. The Medrash says, when Haman came out with his decree to kill all the Jews, it says God told Haman, okay? I'm reading and translating. I'm not adding any of my personal taste into this Medrash. I'm just reading it and translating. And listen to this. And God told Haman, you stupid. I also tried killing the Jewish people and I couldn't. This is what God tells Haman. You idiot. You think you're the first one who tried killing the Jewish people? I myself tried killing the Jewish people. And if not for Moses, I would have killed them. And now you're going to try to kill the Jewish people? If me, God, the creator of the heaven and the earth, couldn't kill the Jewish people, how much more so you? Quite fascinating, no? There's a medrash that says, regarding the time, I believe it's the time before the destruction of the first temple, when Jews were, serving idols, and there were very, very few pious Jews at the time. And it says that God called out at that moment and says, I can't kill them. I can't return them to Egypt. I can't change them with any other nation. But what should I do with them? In other words, God, through Moses, when Moses stood up for the Jews and said, you cannot kill the Jewish people. These are your people that you chose. And when you choose something, you stick with it, right? How many times have you regretted the decision that you made, but you chose it, so you got to stick with it? This is what Moses told God. It doesn't matter, if you regret taking the Jews out of Egypt, it's too late. You chose the Jewish people. You promised them that they're your nation. Now you got to keep your promise. And God says, you're right. And I'm going to keep my promise. They're going to be my nation. And when Haman tries to kill the Jews, God tells Haman, you think you're the first one to try to kill them? Even I tried to kill them and couldn't. Why? Because when you choose something, you stick with it. There's something so essential about a Jew that regardless of how religious they are, what they serve, even the Talmud tells us, even a Jew who is actively serving idolatry, he's going to the temples, he's doing the worst sin a Jew can do, turn away from God, he's still called God's son. She's still called God's child. And there's nothing a Jew can do to separate their essence from God. Because when you choose something, There's a certain ownership that you have for that thing that you chose. And you stick with it through the good and through the bad, through the good times and the tough times. And that's what a choice is, right? Our connection with God, and this is what Haman sees. When Haman looks at Mordechai, he says it's not Mordechai's piousness and righteousness and spiritual lifestyle that refrains him and stops him and from bowing down to me. Haman sees that there's a Jew that doesn't bow down to me. He's not bowing down to me because he's so holy and spiritual. Yeah, some other Jews may say, "Oh, we need to assimilate, we need to bow, we need to let in, we need to cave into what all the anti-Semites of the world want. Let's keep a low profile. They want us to bow. Let's bow." Mordechai says, "No, they're going to hate you regardless. They may come for me first, but they're going to kill you regardless." Why? Because the fact that I exist, the fact that a Jew exists, tells the people who hate us that God exists in this world and that there's morale and consciousness that God brought through his people, through the 10 Commandments that many other religions took upon themselves as well, that came through the Jewish people. So if you feel like that you have some super high natural power, that you could kill every single Jew possible, God is going to say that there's no way you can do that. Why? Because these are my people. The fact that even a baby existed, and this is what Hitler saw, and this is what Haman saw. The fact that a Jewish baby exists, even if we try to do what, instead of killing the baby, let's put the baby in an orphanage, raise him up as a Christian. But the fact that he's a Jew means that there's some sort of God that has the ability to choose something and connect with something physical down here in this world. That means there's consciousness. That means that there's spirituality that can be brought down. And someone with such an ego like Haman can't stand it. He thinks that he's the superpower of the world. Everyone should bow to him. Hitler wants only his race to exist. God forbid there's someone that doesn't look like him that exists. And what gives him even the thought process to think that he can do it? Because I am the most powerful person in the world. But wait a second, there's this group of people called Jews, and they believe that there's something higher than this world. They believe that there's a God that created this world, and that he chose a certain group of people. So you know what the haters do? They said, let me prove it to God. Let me prove it to the God that I can go after every single Jew and kill them. And ultimately, we know what happens, that every single person who tried going after us doesn't exist today, and only we exist today. Now we could understand what's so great about Purim and why we need to get drunk. It's the miracle of Purim is not that obviously, Esther saved the Jewish people. But the miracle, the decree of Purim, sorry, let's start with there. Let's start here. The decree of Purim was against every single child, every single Jewish child. Doesn't matter. You were born yesterday, you would be killed. You're 80 years old, you're going to die tomorrow. No, we'll kill you today. Why? Because the fact that a Jew exists shows that there's higher morale in this world. In other words, it's not even about our understanding. The reason why Haman wanted to kill us is irrelevant to how we understand good and evil. We as physical human beings. He wanted to kill us just the fact that we exist, right? Because we are connected to God. He wanted to kill us regardless of how assimilated you. So how do we celebrate Purim? It has to be higher than our understanding, because if it's all about our understanding, then Haman should have just killed the pious Jews. Haman should have just killed the righteous. Mordechai, his friends, his disciples, his students. But what do we see Haman wants to do? Haman wants to kill every single Jew. Why? Because every Jew has, like we say in Yiddish, a pinteliyid, has a spark inside of him that's much higher than his own consciousness. And therefore, we have to celebrate Purim that takes ourselves. We have to take ourselves out of our own understanding. So therefore, we can't understand the difference between our Haman and Baruch Mordechai that blesses Mordechai and curses Haman, because we're celebrating something that's higher than our own understanding, our own way of thinking. And therefore, you should drink wine to take you out of those limitations of boxing things into good and to evil, because we're going to be killed because we're connected to something that's much greater than ourselves, and we were saved because we're connected to God, which is much greater than our understanding. And what happens in the Purim story, I'm just going to end off with this. What happens in the Purim story is so amazing that, when Haman goes to King Ahasuerus, he tells the king, this nation, like we mentioned earlier, they're this one nation. They're very segregated. They don't talk to anyone else. They do their own thing, but they're bein am, and at the same time they're assimilated and they're taking things over and they're spread out throughout the world. What does Mordechai manage to accomplish? When the decree comes out, what does Mordechai manage to accomplish? He manages to gather the Jews in all 127 provinces that are under the King Ahasuerus. Every single Jew understood at that point that there's no difference between him, if he's righteous, if he's not a righteous Jew, if he's religious, observant, reformed, conservative. Every Jew understood that the haters of the Jewish people will be after him just because he's Jewish. And therefore, they all gathered together, and Mordechai manages to gather together every single Jew. And then we understand why they're called Am Mordechai, the nation of Mordechai. You know why Haman saw it the nation of Mordechai? Because Haman saw the potential of the Jewish people, that when something happens to them, regardless if you look the same way, act the same way, believe the same thing, same ethnicity, same part of the world, or totally different, you're going to stand up for your Jewish brothers and sisters. And when the sword came down on the Jewish people, when they were about to be killed, every single Jew stood up. Every single Jew answered the call of Mordechai. And just to end off, that's why Purim were meant to drink so much, and it's and at the same time it's compared to Yom Kippur, because Purim comes from a place which is higher than our understanding. The miracle was much greater than anything we could put together. It was Haman killing us just because we were chosen, not because we act a certain way. And God saving us just because we're chosen, not because you see the difference between good and evil. And therefore, it's compared to Yom Kippur. You know what? On Yom Kippur, when every single Jew davens, God says that I'm going to forgive you for everything because you're a Jew. I'm going to forgive you for everything just because you walked through the door and you decided to keep Yom Kippur. You don't even need to say anything on Yom Kippur. The Talmud tells us that at Sumo Yom Kippur Mechaper, the actual day is what atones the Jewish people. Just God's presence on Yom Kippurim is what atones all the sins of every single Jew. And that aspect of that type of connection between God and Jews that we feel every single Yom Kippur played out in a totally different demeanor, right? In a totally different setting, but it played out on Purim. We were supposed to be killed just because we have such an intimate connection with God, and we were saved because we have such a connection with God that we're the chosen people. And therefore, the way to celebrate Purim is, it's not that you understand how to fight anti-Semitism, or he understands how to fight anti-Semitism, or how to get rid of evil. The way to celebrate Purim is saying, we're here because God chose us. We don't know why he chose us, but he did choose us for a mission, and we're always going to be here. And our enemies and the Hitlers and the Hamans throughout the generations are going to come and go, and they're going to try really, really hard. But at the end of the day, we will always win because God is with us and God chooses us. So let's celebrate, raise a glass of wine to support him. It's not about us. It's about God's connection with us, something much deeper that's inside of every single Jew. And therefore, we celebrate like no other holiday. Thank you all for joining us today. Today, Purim is 13 days. We'll be celebrating on March 24th, Sunday afternoon at 4 p.m. We'd love for all of you to join us at the Grand Purim festivities here at the synagogue on, again, Sunday, March 24th. Looking forward to seeing you all. Wishing you a happy and blessed new month and happy Purim. All the best.